Hello, welcome to our broadcast here. Thank you for listening. We are Carnivore Theology podcast, and our mission is to help Christians to move from milk to meat, moving past the basic Christian faith and moving to become wise and skilled, world-changing followers of Christ. Today we are located at Chuck E. Cheese's in Toronto. We got a special discount today because Chad flashed his frequent Chuck E. Cheese card, and now we're getting the VIP treatment. But first, we're enjoying our super large-size sodas.
You wouldn't believe how hard it was. You wouldn't believe how hard it was to find a corner in this place that wasn't insanely loud so we could do this recording. We're actually stuffed under the pop machine right now.
Yeah, I think Chad has himself hooked right up under the cream soda just to keep it going there. So.
Okay, quit it, Chad. We have to do this thing.
Look, that's all to the good, but Chucky is coming out in about 3 minutes, so we're going to have to cut this short because I'm definitely going to get some tokens.
From Chucky?
Yeah, didn't you ever see him throw the ticket? You guys have never been here before, have you?
When Chucky
This
comes
is a
out,
magical place.
When Chucky comes out, I am conveniently located in the bathroom. He terrifies me.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. He does terrify my 3-year-old as well.
Yeah. All right.
So, just to introduce ourselves and who we are and how we're connected, I'll actually throw this at Chad. Chad, why are you involved with this podcast, and how do you know Al?
Well, I'm primarily involved because I really like the pizza here at Chuck E. Cheese. But secondarily, because Steve and Al and myself have been friends for a long time, since we were all at NABC together, which became Taylor University College, which became defunct. And so really, none of us probably have actually graduated. Or at least we're defunct. And we have carried on a friendship and a dialogue over the last, 15 years? And we talk about all kinds of things. And I think, from my perspective anyway, we just thought it would be fun to let people listen in to the interesting, quirky, and often helpful things we talk about.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Chad, do you remember when I took you over to Al's place the very first time?
For an X-Files marathon?
That's it. Yeah.
A lot of good things happen on those nights.
Nice. Yeah, well, Chad, you explained it well. Do you have any other comments on that, Al, that you would like to say about why are we doing this?
Well, it started sort of with an idea for me because we all got together one time. We were talking about how we all have these struggles, we all have these conversations. Wouldn't it be nice if we could go somewhere and listen to people be able to talk about some of the issues that we don't hear talk about very often? You were talking about guys in your life that could really benefit from being able to find topics that actually are meaningful to them and that big questions and stuff. And I thought, well, why don't we try to do this? We talk about this stuff all the time, so let's record it and see if other people want to listen to it.
Yeah, that's exactly. You mentioned my motivation there, and I'm around other people, and they bring up these questions, and I don't have the answer always, and I really want to be able to, as that verse from Hebrews says, move them from milk to meat, and further that even in my own life. So.
Yep. Excellent.
Yeah.
So basically, Steve, you're saying you get asked hard questions and you want to sound smart, so you're pooling everybody's intelligence together, and if the three of us can come up with an answer, you can claim it.
That's good.
You got it. Absolutely right. It's,
he started at the shallow end of the pool.
The art of appearing wise is not always having the right answer. It's also being able to research and to present it as your own.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Good. Now that our motivations are all on the table.
I want fame and fortune. That's why I'm here. Let's go.
I want to be sponsored by Audible.com. I can actually listen to all the books I want to buy.
Yeah, that's the hard part of this podcast is trying to figure out exactly how we can fit in that many brand names without sounding like we're doing it.
Oh no, product placement to me really is it's the most crass of all things, and I would never just continually bring up Zondervan and its publishing house or anything that would sort of detract from what we're doing.
I agree.
Okay, guys. Well, how about the let's deal with the topic of the day. There are thousands of video games available for people to play. The target audience is mostly young men. Are there issues with video games from a biblical perspective? How much time we play? What type of games we play? Do we play with other people? So I'll pose that question to you first, Al, and I'll see what you have to say.
All right. Most video games are not inherently evil. Yes, there are some that romanticize and revel in promoting evil, and even the demonic, like Doom or Diablo, Grand Theft Auto, and especially, I would say, Flappy Bird. There is not one game in the entire world that makes me think worse thoughts than Flappy Bird. My favorite video game right now is a video game called Punch Quest. I play it on my iPad. I love it because I get to punch evil minions, and I get to punch vampire bats, and I get to punch evil skeletons, and that makes me feel good about myself. But what I don't want to talk about is necessarily how video games encourage bad behavior or that they are gateways to the demonic. I think that's been covered by a lot of people. I don't necessarily want to talk about how they're necessarily can be addictive or they ruin lives, though that is true in some cases. For me, what I want to talk about today is the biggest question that I think Christians should ask themselves when it comes to these things. It's a simple question: why am I playing? The biggest problem with video games is that they give Christian men and women exactly what God is offering them, but without the discipline and the sacrifice or having to connect with their actions with reality. I've been reading Ecclesiastes a lot lately, and the whole book is about the pursuit of meaning. The author looks for meaning in so many different ways. Over and over, he's trying everything: partying and drinking and sex and hard work and industry and studying. He tries art and science and acquiring riches and honor, and it all comes up meaningless. The only two things he finds meaning and substance in are loving others and worshiping God. And what bugs me about video games is that playing them is often the exact same pursuit: to find meaning in something that is almost utterly meaningless. So let me give you an example of what I mean. And I don't want to overgeneralize. As Steve, you said, stereotypically this is a masculine problem, especially young men. So let me use them as an example. Men want to go on an important mission. We want to feel powerful and strong and useful, and we want to be helpful. We want to save the girl. We want to save our friends. We want to save the nation and save the world. It's built into us, and it's this amazing God-given drive. Video games give us that, but take away the reality. So if we screw it up, all we have to do is reset. We never even have to get off the couch. But the people who play these things, they feel like they've done something. The best thing about video games is that they're interactive. That's what makes them fun. You get to do something, and then the video game responds, and it feels real. So when they walk away from the video game, whether it's Call of Duty or Minecraft or Mario or Candy Crush, they can feel strong and helpful and useful and creative and virile and intelligent and important. So they've fallen into the trap. They believe they've found something with something of meaning. They believe they've found something of worth, but it's a fantasy. The strength that they have by leveling up their character is pretend. The mission that they've just accomplished is meaningless. The money that they amassed and that they made will never help anyone. The enemies are all around them defeated, but they're imaginary. And the girl that they saved at the end is digital. And I think because they believe that lie, they aren't driven to greater things. They don't have a desperation to engage in the faith. They don't need God because they just learned that with enough practice, they can win the game all by themselves. They avoid church because it's uncomfortable. It has a confusing story. It's not moving fast enough. It's not all about them and moving them forward. They avoid real girls because They don't follow the rules of the game, and they don't cry out for help and then fall into their arms at the end. They avoid real combat because they're too scared because they can't just reset if something bad happens. They avoid real problems. They avoid real puzzles because there are real stakes. So they stick to their fantasy world and they lose themselves in the lie. And then in the deepest irony, and this is what bugs me the most, everything that they want is available when they follow Jesus and live out their faith in a good church. They'll be on mission. They'll help people get saved. They will be able to fight the ultimate enemy. They will get stronger. They will battle demons. And more than likely, they'll even connect with a real girl. The church is full of people who can help them move on their real mission in this world, help them level up, help them grow better, so they can become men and women of God who God created them to be. But for some, because of their fascination with video games, they will never experience that in real life.
Definitely some food for thought. At one point there, Al, you made me think of, do you remember in the Simpsons episode, the Billy Graham's Bible conversion game or Bible thumper game?
Yeah.
It's it definitely can relate. Video games about the Bible. Even when I taught at a Christian school, there's times where I made games about learning the Bible using a smartboard and making it into Jeopardy. So trying to engage people the best they can, or find the best way to engage them. So Chad, what are your thoughts around video games and the impact?
I appreciated what El had to say, but I really hope that he's not saying that, Steve, that your recent marriage on Second Life is any less valid than his own.
Well, it's already, it's kind of under the radar. Polygamy is not really practiced.
I see.
My wife may just have to come and kick my butt for saying that. So.
At least this isn't live on the internet for everyone to see. You're all right.
Yeah.
Good point. Well, my thoughts actually. I guess what I would say is just to add a little bit different angle on how we look at it is, as you guys already know, the best place to turn when we contemplate any question of Christian practice is really not to try and reinvent the wheel ourselves, but to look back at the spiritual reflections of Christian giants. And frankly, I can't imagine that any of us could think of anyone better suited to helping us wrestle through the question of Christians and video games than the Puritans. Now, I know that you're probably thinking that quite apart from the temporal challenge of Puritanism being a 17th century British phenomenon, that if they saw 30-year-olds living in their parents' basements playing video games, they would probably have a heart attack and die, and then begin rolling in their graves until the second coming. And we do know that according to common knowledge, the Puritan movement has been described as the haunting fear that someone, somewhere might be happy. But C.S. Lewis corrects us in our thinking by telling us that whatever we might have heard about the Puritans, really the opposite is probably true. So whatever we think that they might have said, if we think the opposite, we probably have gauged them correctly. And I want to make that point first by just giving you guys just a couple of fun examples that I read this week. The first is in thinking about the Puritans' view of sex, which hopefully we can say on this broadcast. If you were to think about at least the common answer, would you think the Puritans are into sex? You'd probably think not so
Go ahead,
much.
Steve. Answer that question. I already know the answer.
No, I think they would find that the pleasure of sex would be a mortal sin.
Not puritanical enough, right? Well, actually, that view would be totally wrong. They spoke freely and frequently in books and sermons and counseling about sex. And they saw it, of course, in a biblical context. But you'll find them preaching that a husband and wife should engage, and I got one quote here, with goodwill and delight, willingly, readily, and cheerfully with one another. Another book on marriage devoted a chapter to sex, said it was most proper and an essential act of marriage. And we even have a historical record, which is great, of a woman who came to her leaders in her church and said that her husband was not satisfying her in the bedroom. So the elders called the man in and had a meeting with him and described him as his biblical and spiritual duties. he didn't respond quickly enough. So he was publicly excommunicated from the church. So the Puritans, big fans of sex.
Yeah, totally.
How about this one? Did the Puritans decry fashion and wear black clothes with no buttons? Again, you'd probably think that was them. I'll make this one briefer.
The reason I'm being quiet is because I read the exact same article as you. So go ahead, Steve, take it over.
You know where it's going.
I do.
No, buttons were too flashy and showy. Again.
Well, John Owen, to give an illustration, was a really well-known Puritan. And on a typical day, he came to lecture as a professor at Oxford University with his hair powdered, a lace neckband intertwined with costly strings. His sleeves were made of lace, completing a velvet jacket. On record, we know that he's worn red, blue, green, yellow, purple, and brown jackets. He added breeches that came down to his knees and were finished with pointed ribbons. And he loved imported Spanish boots with lacy cambric tops.
So
I'm not even sure what that means.
Elton John.
That is
Pretty much.
That is Liberace. You just described Liberace.
Yes, that's even more true.
So there are our Puritans. So I decided to take from that and think, what would the Puritans say about video games? So my first thoughts were they would probably think, as I said, they'd fall over with a heart attack and die and then roll around in their graves for the second coming. But then I started thinking about it a little deeper and thinking that the opposite is probably true. So I did a little investigation, asked a few questions. Did you know that one of the main criticisms, the main ones published by the opponents of Puritans, was their love of sporting?
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Anglican George Fox despised the Puritans for what he called their love of ribbons and lace and costly apparel, their sporting and their feasting. Catholic Thomas More said the Puritans that the Puritans despised the good spiritual practices such as a holy fast, and instead they would eat fast, drink fast, and lust fast in lechery.
That's great.
Now, as you read the descriptions, they loved sporting, they loved entertainments, and it really is hard for us to balance out how a people who truly were dead serious in things spiritual could enjoy entertainments in life so much. But it's not such a surprise when we think about the fact that for the Puritans, they believed God was a God of joy. William Tyndale, who's famous for his translation of the Bible, was actually a Puritan thinker, and he said that the gospel was good, merry, glad, and joyful tidings that makes a man's heart glad and makes him sing and dance and leap for joy. Another pastor of the Puritan era preached on the subject of recreation specifically. I read the sermon, great thing. He said that God intended Christians to enjoy them as liberties with thankfulness to God that allows us to use these liberties to refresh ourselves. And so I think, as I think about video game use in the Christian today, we might be able to put it in the category of entertainments used to refresh ourselves. Although we would have to say that we would want to look at the contents of the games with some judgment, as Elle had mentioned earlier. The Puritans did, for example, ban certain entertainments such as bear baiting, gambling, and most naturally, the ever-insidious bowling in or around taverns.
Yeah.
It's a common problem.
That makes sense.
They believed that those activities were actually inherently evil. But they did love engaging in football, or what they would soccer. Bowling, obviously far away from taverns. Reading, music, swimming, skating, and archery. So I would think sports games, shooting games, music games, and any relatively innocent entertainments the Puritans would say should be enjoyed with thankfulness to God. But for heaven's sakes, they would say, get a job, move out of your parents' basement, and buy your own games.
Yeah.
So the Puritans would support the Wii over the Xbox, by the sounds of it.
Well, with the new Kinect, maybe it's okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, absolutely. The question that comes to me around is neurologically imprinting on people. It can create pathways in the brain leading towards, repetitious behavior. The fact that when you play a game, you do get that emotional high when you level up, or get ranked higher, or you're standing in the world of like a game that I used to play, Unreal Tournament. I really liked the fact that I was in the top 3% in the world. That was a rush, and I played a lot just to move up 0.5%.
Right. Well, you know what? Exactly what we were talking about. I think we all kind of landed in the same spot, which is that idea of uh, video games are not inherently evil, but our choice to play them can create sin in our hearts, the temptation to use them wrongly, the choice of which ones. Uh, let me throw that out there. You talk about the imprinting and then the neurological information, especially the repetition. Uh, Let me throw this out there that video games and that repetition and the way that they're designed interactively can be a way for us to sin without using people, right? So, for example, like you go to a tame game and you're encouraged to be greedy, you're encouraged to be ruthless, you're encouraged to be reckless, you're encouraged to be a god of your own world. And that's bad enough, but in the really bad games, you can live out your most violent fantasies of being a bully or a thief or beating up women or even going to strip clubs. And doing that over and over and over and living that out even in a fantasy world, there's no way that can be good for your soul, right?
I'm pretty confident that the Puritans would place that style of gaming within the realm of bowling near a tavern.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right.
Where I would think for myself as well that we would always want to be careful about the content of what we're playing, and that can be tricky at some of the lines. But just a reflection too on Steve's specific thing, I think part of it just comes down to balance for what the patterns in our life are. Because in a pastoral role, I see people struggling all the time with patterns in their life, either sinful or just habitual things that get in the way of good things. And it is tough to work your way out of it. You have an ingrained pattern, and that could be on top of things like some of these highs that you might get that are actually doing some mental rewiring. But most of the stuff that I've read says that we can generally be flexible enough to rewire again, and contemplating Christ. And I would think, if we look in a biblical text, 1 day in 7 was meant to be a day of rest, and 6 days were meant to be days of labor. And there's some spiritual things involved in that. But if you look from a balance perspective, if we're having 6 out of 7 units of our day or week devoted to killing things in video games, we're probably out of balance.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, Paul says it, right? He says, all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up, right? That's 1 Corinthians 10:23. And the idea of saying, are we allowed? Well, yeah, we're allowed. In our freedom, we have an amazing gift in Christ to be able to go and enjoy His world, create new things, and explore it. And I think if you rack your brain hard enough, you can probably find some really positive elements of a lot of different kind of games. But when we start to use our freedom, and this is Galatians, when we start to use our freedom as an opportunity of the flesh, which means that we use that God-given grace and wonderful world that He's given us and then use it to promote the fleshly sins, we get ourselves in trouble. So instead of serving one another, and as I was saying, instead of doing it in reality, helping people in reality, we end up losing ourselves.
Yeah, the King James version of that Galatians passage says we use our freedom as a cloak for vice.
Yeah, okay.
So, period.
Well, and you talk about the kids in the basements, the young men in the basement, they're literally under the cloak. Right? Dark deeds done in darkness, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very true. Any last points before we wrap up?
I would just say that I think that I would think that it is okay to enjoy some of life just for the sake of enjoyment, because God created us to be creatures that enjoy. Eden was a paradise.
Mm-hmm.
David the psalmist was writing music and poetry, and you can just enjoy beauty and things, and in so doing, we're reflecting the image of God and truly enjoying Him. We don't need to turn it all the time into spiritualizing it. We don't need to separate the worlds like that. We live in God's world.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I would close with sort of the opposite of that coin, with the same coin though. So yeah, you can use your video games like the same way that we play baseball or reading or crossword puzzles and these fun things, going out and bowling within the realm of not around a tavern. But we live in our world that we have to be careful that whatever we do to the glory of God. Therefore, we got to keep our minds on things that are true and noble and right and excellent and praiseworthy. And if we're living in a fantasy world that without question does not glorify God, that isn't excellent, it isn't lovely, it isn't praiseworthy, and is allowing us to live out sinful, sexual, violent fantasies. And we got to watch ourselves. But that doesn't mean we have to eliminate them from our lives. It means that we got to be careful what we do and what we use.
That's great. Well, I won't feel too guilty playing another half hour later today of Tower of Madness 2. Aliens stealing sheep. It's just wrong. It's just wrong. We need to be stopped. So.
I know. I agree. Those Goombas need to be stomped. Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah.
I play FIFA 14.
You nerd. That's basically just looking at the screen and doing math.
Anyways, before we insult any other groups today, we'll I thank you for listening. As we
I got a whole list of people to insult. Hold on. Where's my list? We'll do that next episode.
Yeah, I think we'll work through that list pretty quickly. Well, thank you for listening today as we discuss the importance of knowing what you are putting into your mind and how you're training yourself to think, and always thinking of God and His purpose for us. This has been the Carnivore Theology with Chad, Al, and Steve. To find out more, go to theartofthechristianninja.com/carnivore-theology. We encourage you to connect with your local biblical church and keep your eyes on the cross.
Amen. See you later.